The Xcession Everything Service Management podcast is back. We're delighted to welcome back old listeners and hopefully some new ones as well to the podcast that talks about everything service management. We will cover tooling, vendors, people, process, and hope to bring you some of the best insights that we can that you might be able to use in your enterprise service management journey. My name is Sunil Duggal, and today I'm joined by my colleague Mark.
I'm delighted to be here. Really excited to be on this podcast.
Fantastic. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then maybe a bit about Xcession.
My name is Mark Twomey. I'm the CEO of Xcession. In Xcession, we help organizations across the UK and Ireland and Europe modernize service operations across functions such as IT, HR, and other enterprise services. Delighted to be here.
Great stuff. So today, Mark, we're going to be talking about ServiceNow's flagship event, Knowledge. It was held in Las Vegas, as it is every year. We were told last week that there were 25,000 attendees. There were about 500 different sessions from the keynote to other breakout sessions and a number of major announcements that I think fundamentally shift the way ServiceNow positions itself in the market. But before we go into some of the detail, Mark, give us your thoughts on the event. What was it like for you?
Well, the scale of it and the energy around the place is phenomenal, right? I don't really go to many conferences in the US, but the scale of it is phenomenal. The size of it, the amount of walking that we all do, averaging 20 odd thousand steps every day. That tells you where you're going. The rooms are huge. There's people everywhere. There's queues for things. The food is good. The energy was really, really good. A lot of people are very enthused about being there. It's high energy, high octane stuff, and it's what I would call a very good show as well. All right, at times.
So, Mark, I would completely agree with you. I mean, when you're there, the size, the scale, and as you say, the energy really gives you a feel for both how much investment the enterprise service management marketplace and the business transformation marketplace has made into ServiceNow as an organization. But it also tells you quite a lot, doesn't it, about how ServiceNow themselves want to be perceived. You know, they want to be seen as the organization that will make change happen in your business. And it really comes across, doesn't it, that kind of feeling?
Yeah, it's huge. And it's a massive ecosystem that's there. Like every major consulting firm in the world is there. Every major technology partner, such as your Googles, your Microsofts, etc., they're all there. Anybody who has any product that aligns in any way to the ServiceNow ecosystem is there. The whole thing for me was that the conversation has moved around kind of business transformation to autonomous AI. It's moving more and more towards that, right? So everything was, every single talk, every single show that I went to was all about how ServiceNow is the AI operating system of the future.
So it's interesting, isn't it, to think about how the narrative from ServiceNow has changed over the last few years. So they were the platform for digital transformation. They became the platform for business transformation, and now, as you say, they are the AI control tower for business transformation. So that shift to AI first is front and center, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. I think AI first and governance first is the message I would take from the week, right? It's you can build anything, but it runs in ServiceNow. That's the message. You can control everything from the ServiceNow platform, irrelevant of what LLMs you're using, what agents you're using, what models you're using. Everything is available to you in the ServiceNow platform. It's a very, 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 it's a very governance first approach. It's essentially the enterprise AI operating system is what ServiceNow is positioning itself as.
Yeah, absolutely right. So let's talk through some of the big initiatives. So we have the overall picture here that, there is this now vision of governance of your AI ecosystem that exists within your organization. But how do they make that a reality? So perhaps talk through, Mark, some of the kind of big announcements, the big initiatives that we've heard.
So Yeah, there's about 3 or 4 that I would like to really focus on, which is number one is around AI governance, right? And that's led by what they refer to as the AI control tower. This is the enterprise AI operations governance for Fortune 500 companies and beyond, right? That was probably the most biggest announcement from the week, right? So that people are losing visibility of what's going on in AI. They don't know what systems are being used, what data they're accessing, who owns them, what the risk level is, how much value that AI is bringing to an organization. They're not available to them. So they've broken into very kind of 5 simple, distinct pillars that they look at from an AI control perspective. One is that you build an inventory of every AI asset across your enterprise, right? No matter what application or tool that AI is sitting on, be that, Microsoft, Google, Workday, etc. ServiceNow will be able to create an inventory of that and explain to me who owns that, what it does, what other systems it's accessing, what data it's accessing. So it's building out a kind of what I refer to as basically it's a CMDB for AI, right? And the clever thing that ServiceNow have done is they've extended out their CMDB to enable them to be able to record this information and discover it. So the key 3 pillars that they talked about is definitely sense, decide, act, right? Sense is any data from any system is available to you to consume in AI. But in relation to the discovery of the AI control tower, that is really discovering your AI assets and what they are. So, your agents, tools, systems they access, sub-agents that link to those agents, everything is building up a very, very clear discovery and relationship picture of what your AI assets are across your enterprise, irrelevant of whether it's in ServiceNow or in any other system. Right. The other thing I think I would take from the AI control tower is that there is the other pillars in there are really I'll call them out quickly, which is discover, govern, secure, observe, and measure. Okay, so discover we talked about. That's building an inventory of your AI assets. It's your CMDB for AI, essentially, right? Govern is really when you apply policy management, approvals, and compliance to your AI. So you're saying what policies they need to adhere to. In the same way that humans have to adhere to policies, we've had this with things like ISO 27001 and other frameworks that are in place. So govern is aligned to the EU AI Act, NIS2, those types of things. So ServiceNow has pre-built models for that. Secure is around where they start to bring in the new acquisitions, which are Veza and Aramis. So as particularly Veza is talking about identity security, right? And it's identifying humans, non-humans, and agents, what access they have, what permissions they have, and is able then to align that to the policies we mentioned before, so that there's essentially implementing zero trust for every AI. Okay, so it has to be governed in that way. All right. So then when you've got to your governance in place and your security in place, then you get into observe. So they provide real-time monitoring. It's not just a dashboard, it's a real-time operational dashboard where you're able to monitor and do telemetry of AI behavior, such as saying, what decision did the agent make? Why did it make that decision? How long did it take? What hallucination, if any, took place? These are all tracked and measured within the AI control tower. And lastly, you've got measuring, where you're actually measuring the value that it brings you. So you're able to say, what value did I get from this part of AI, from this agent? What's the ROI I'm getting from this? How can I measure cost, usage of AI across the business? So, even in Xcession, we use things like Claude, Copilot, Gemini, etc. So being able to actually understand that from a small organization like us to a larger organizations of thousands and thousands of people, it's hugely important. But it's not just a dashboard; it's a governance operating system, if that makes sense, for AI. Right?
Okay, so that's the approach around discovering and governing AI within the enterprise organization. What next?
So the other key announcements from last week were really around Otto as a new conversational interface for ServiceNow. Right? Otto is designed to be the conversational layer that allows an employee or an agent in IT, HR, security, etc., to interact with ServiceNow and multiple agents behind that and data behind that, right? So it's the new enterprise persona layer that ServiceNow have introduced, right? So it's moving towards what I would say the portal is dead, long live the conversational layer. Right? and that doesn't really roll very well, but that's where we're going towards, right? So portals will probably become a thing of the past. Otto and conversational layers. Think of it like Copilot for ServiceNow in ServiceNow terms, but with a lot of features available to it in the background.
So is this Moveworks, Mark? Is this the Moveworks acquisition that has become or is becoming Otto?
Yeah, they're embedding that into this, right? So essentially, it's the next layer of what was in the Now Assist before, right? So employee works, as it's referred to, Otto will become the conversational layer for not just employees, but for all people who use ServiceNow, depending on the role that they have.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is a traditional today and agent workspace will, and we don't know the timeframes and we don't know exactly the practicalities, but eventually will migrate to a much more Copilot. You know, if you were interfacing with Copilot or ChatGPT, for example, that kind of interface where you are natural language querying, you're getting a, you know, rather than having a list of all the tickets that you're working on, you would say, you know, what are the priority tickets for me to deal with today? What's about to breach SLA, etc. And it would come up with, you know, the necessary information for you to be able to then go and enact on that.
Yeah. I suppose the key thing for it is the conversational layer of insights to action, right? So insights and action is something that you hear quite a lot in the industry, but ServiceNow talk about it a lot about their data and analytics. And Otto is essentially another way of adding, you could say, if you were, say, a service desk leader, you could say, what's the longest aging tickets that we have open based on priority? And I can add that to my own personal canvas for the day. And I can share that with somebody else. So it's very, very dynamic. It's not about, we have to build a dashboard and make that dashboard available to our workspace, which is where we were in ServiceNow up to today, let's say. Now we're introducing dynamic insights to action from a data perspective.
Yeah. So what I particularly like about this, and I think is very interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about the autonomous workforce. But if you imagine, you know, a service desk agent today in a very busy desk, they get into work in the morning, they open up their, you know, ServiceNow application, they go to their agent workspace, and they will see a whole long list of tickets, right, that they need to address, incidents that have come in overnight, whatever it may be. Which sounds quite impractical, doesn't it, if you're interfacing via a Copilot or ChatGPT presentation layer. But in reality, I think when you combine that with the autonomous workforce, the principle here is that big long list of tickets will never hit the human agent. That the human agent will only deal with the high priority, more complex cases that they need to deal with, because actually the bulk of the day-to-day will be dealt with autonomously using AI agents.
I would agree. That was a huge announcement from last week, was they're bringing in L1 agents across every line of business that they support, IT, HR, security, risk, etc., customer service. So they're essentially leading with their own L1 agents that they're available to you. You basically install them the same way you'd install an application on your phone, such as in the Play Store or in the Apple App Store. Once you install it, you leave it there sitting for a number of days. It has a number of technologies in the background that's using from ServiceNow, such as process mining, your knowledge articles, what was done with previous tickets. So essentially that agent is doing is applying context to what your tickets are doing, what route they've taken, who's done what with them, and then learn from that over a period of time. And based on that learning, then begins to execute. And essentially what you are doing is you are introducing an L1 support agent for your P4 incidents initially, right? But also enables you to then, utilize this from how does the service desk support end users for the ability to access service requests if they haven't got it themselves, what to do next, and it gets to the resolution. So what you're becoming is that you have a teammate in your team, which is an AI agent, and that teammate in your team is responsible for executing the simpler, repeatable L1 tasks, where you as in the team then are focused on more the high value tasks and to drive more value in the organization. Ultimately, what it ends up with is a better experience for users.
Yeah, and a better, I guess, increased agility and obviously productivity for the organization. But if we just take that example, so you have an L1 agent, and an L1 agent is unlikely to, exist purely within the ServiceNow ecosystem. In fact, they're very likely to have interaction with potentially other agents from other tools that may well exist within the ecosystem of that particular vendor. So let's say, for example, Workday, which is quite a nice segue onto Action Fabric, isn't it? So maybe you can talk a little bit about the thinking behind that.
Yeah, there's kind of two key characteristics, which is Action Fabric, which enables essentially AI from other systems to execute operational workflows within ServiceNow, right? Fully managed by the governance we talked about, the audit, the approvals we talked about, the auditability we talked about. So ServiceNow essentially is saying we are the runtime layer for enterprise AI execution, right? So you can build agents in Claude, in Copilot, etc., but you can still trigger actions within ServiceNow from that. Okay, so it's hugely exciting to what you can do, but it's all built around the concept of that ServiceNow will be aware of it. It's governed. They can see what's going on. You can measure it. You've got telemetry on it, so that's all available to you also. Hugely important. So they're making themselves open as they're an open technology platform, where before you might have to execute a lot of these things within the platform.
Absolutely, and the deal sign up with Claude, and particularly called Co-work, is I guess the first step, or the big step in that direction, isn't it?
Yeah, there seems to be a strategic relationship between Anthropic and ServiceNow. This ties into also where they're coming from a build agent perspective. So what ServiceNow has realized is that developers like to build in the platforms they like to build in, right? So Claude being one, Codex, Figma, etc. So what ServiceNow is saying, build it anywhere, run it on ServiceNow. I've heard that saying so many times this week, right? Yeah. So they would always say that the build agent ServiceNow Studios is referred to now is the best interface for executing this. So in that way, people who are aware of ServiceNow will understand that you can build workflows, scripts, catalog items, etc. Anything you want to build within ServiceNow is available within the ServiceNow Studio now. So you can low code, no code, agentic, intent development can be done within ServiceNow, but also can be done within Claude, Codex, etc. Right? So it's huge for developers, but it still brings into the best practices and the governance around this. Where they've taken it even a step further is the App Engine Management Center, right? Where organizations who are really focused on ServiceNow and consolidating applications across their business build applications on the ServiceNow platform. That management center again applies a layer of governance and security to your applications that you can now view, and that they've made that free for everyone also, which is very interesting. So a lot of areas where people had to get different SKUs and things now are becoming more ubiquitous in the platform, and being able to consume more. The more you can consume, the more you can use in the future.
So we have this kind of matrix type approach in many ways, don't we? That we still have within the platform specific workflows. So we still have ITSM, we have IT operations management, we still have employee workflows, HR or service delivery as an example. We have customer facing workflows in CRM and CSM, don't we? But now we have this horizontal view of AI, the AI control tower, Otto Action Fabric that runs across that. And then, if you can't find the right module in the various workflows, then you have build agent available to you to extend the application scope that is built on the ServiceNow platform.
Exactly. And you also have, you've build agent, which is in the ServiceNow Studio, but you also have the ServiceNow SDK, which is enabling you to build outside of ServiceNow, but still adhering to all the best practices that are required from a ServiceNow perspective. So again, it comes back to my point of build anything, anywhere, run it on ServiceNow. But the key objective is, I suppose, if you want to now build an application on the ServiceNow platform that may have been in a legacy platform or a standalone platform, you can build that on ServiceNow, and straight away you get the entire level of governance in the platform. You get AI capabilities built into your application straight away. This is a bit of a game changer also. Like, so what ServiceNow is betting on is that people will consolidate applications onto their platform. People will make a strategic initiative, which is that they will use ServiceNow because they have AI capabilities enabled in that platform straight away. They have governance in that platform straight away. So it's not vibe coding, it's vibe coding and then real governance at the end of it, which is the differentiator in my opinion. Right?
Yeah. Before we move on to security and governance and just talk a little bit more about the acquisitions in that space, I just wanted to touch on the concept of the context engine, which underpins a lot of what we've talked about here. So the idea here is that, if you were to, as a an individual or an individual at home or an individual in an organization, go and engage with Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot, you are essentially using probabilistic AI, aren't you? It's trained on publicly available data, and what comes back to you is based on probabilities from that training data. Context engine has a slightly different take on this, doesn't it? So maybe just explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, context engine is about understanding the operational dependencies, the governance, and the architecture that sits behind where you're at. So AI is better with better context. We all know that. The more context you give and when you're using Claude, Copilot, etc., the more context you give it, the better output you receive. ServiceNow has identified that, put a lot of focus into what they refer to as context engine. Quite simply, context engine knows a lot about a user, for example. It knows where they are, what department they're in, who the manager is, what CIs and assets they have, what services they consume, what policies they need to adhere to or come under them. So these are all available in the context engine now, so that they when you're using agentic AI in the future, you have that information available to you, which ties into the sense, decide, act. So you're making act decisions based on context, which is very, very clear. So a lot of it, I have to say, is very well thought out, both architecturally and how it can be used across multiple organizations. What it does bring in, and which probably we talk about a bit more later, is what to do to ensure you have good context and where you need to work on in the future, because enabling that context requires work to start now and having very strong foundations. So that's a critical thing for me to look at.
We will come on to the challenges, don't worry. So let's talk a little bit. Actually, before we talk a little bit about security and governance, one last point, I think, on context engine. The other thing that we heard quite a lot was that ServiceNow has or is transacting 1 billion workflows and I can't remember, 1.5 trillion, I think, interactions every year. And they are using that also to feed into context engine, aren't they? So they are using that, enormous wealth of knowledge that they have built up via interactions and transactions on the platform to feed into context engine. And I think that is, conceptually incredibly powerful, isn't it? Right? You are, your starting point is not zero, right? Your starting point is not even the context within your organization. It is essentially leveraging what could be seen as best practice on a global basis to an extent, right? To feed into how you might improve your own organization and the workflows that exist within it. So that's a pretty powerful concept in my view.
It's huge. It's huge. And I have to say, context for AI is so critical. And they have really, really addressed that by, focusing on that context engine, using the data that's available in the platform, guiding users and customers as to what data is required to build that context engine out, and then being able to act on that data based on what's available to you. It's hugely powerful.
Absolutely. Agreed. So let's quickly talk about security and governance, because there were two big acquisitions, weren't there? that feed into this and are highly strategic, I think, as well moving forward, aren't they?
Exactly. ServiceNow is has now it's now data plus workflows plus AI plus security.
Yeah.
Right. There's a fourth. Right. Security is a huge pillar in this organization now. Security is essential to ServiceNow's strategy moving forward. Already with the acquisitions of Veza and Aramis, they're approximately $1 billion in ACV. They expect that to grow exponentially. Where security comes in, I suppose, is that in the industry, we spend a lot of time governing humans, and now we need to plan for governing digital workflows alongside the humans, right? So identity, the Veza acquisition is huge for this from an identity security perspective, because it focuses on any identity, be it an AI identity, non-human accounts, human accounts, MCP security, provides immutable auditability and data protection around this information. So it's very, very critical to understanding what's going on, and it ties very much into your AI control tower. And then Aramis is more on the physical attack surface areas. So anything from IT to IoT, OT, critical infrastructure, it's going to be a huge player in this. Aramis is used by a lot of big organizations. Those organizations tend to be ServiceNow customers. It's going to fit into this very, very well.
There's a piece around the Aramis acquisition as well that I think is very interesting, which is if you're talking about an organization that focuses on IT primarily, then discovering IT assets is fine. But if you're an organization that talks about running your entire business, then you can't just limit yourself to discovery of IT assets, can you? You have to be able to go out there and discover everything. And so Aramis actually addresses that, doesn't it? They talk about discovery of IoT, they talk about discovery of medical devices, of operational technology, devices as well. So actually it's become a much broader discovery and dependency mapping solution for them. And I imagine that it probably spells in some way a change, I would say, within the sort of traditional ITOM discovery modules that they have.
I would say so. I think anywhere the way I took my take from it is that anywhere an attack surface exists, we've got it covered. Yeah. That's what Aramis are really focused on, is any attack surface, we need to be able to know what that is so we can secure it and protect it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so look, we've covered the big initiatives, and there are some very big initiatives in that. In fact, I have to be honest, I'm still computing it. I'm sure you are as well. But the key question for an organization like Xcession and for our customers is, so how does that translate to where they are today? And so I guess the question, Mark, is, what should an existing ServiceNow customer today, or perhaps one that's thinking about investing in ServiceNow, what should they be considering short, medium, and then long term?
Yeah, this is a tough question, but it's an interesting one. All right. First thing is, there's a lot of hype at the moment. So I would say don't buy everything. Create a practical roadmap for your organization is the first thing I would say, right? So you do get a lot now with the new SKUs that ServiceNow provided, but don't buy everything, because you need to create a practical roadmap for you as an organization. Start where you are today, plan forward, set a strategy, execute. But first thing I would do in the short term for any organization, right, is focus on your foundations, right? The key thing for me is, we talked about context engine there. Context engine is very dependent on CMDB maturity, quality of knowledge articles, simplification of your workflows, right? All right. I would say what I mean by that is, a lot of ServiceNow companies have invested heavily in ServiceNow, but they have customized it because it's such a flexible platform. In order to execute AI, you need to have what I would call a low technical debt, be quite aligned to out of the box, even to get access to these new guaranteed 100-day services executions that they talked about. One of the key components is to have a low technical debt, right? So it's very, very important. Automation opportunities, putting in place your governance structures, right? A key question for me is, who owns AI in the organization anymore? Is it the CIO, CDIO, CAIO? Is it the CISO? There's a big question out there. So understanding governance structures, RACI metrics is around this. understanding what your AI tools are today, how are they being used. There's a huge risk that this gets out of control extremely fast, and AI has the ability to amplify chaos very, very quickly. So my personal view is if you really focus on your foundations around governance, CDB, knowledge article, workflow simplification, if your processes are broken today, AI will definitely scale that problem faster and quicker.
So the first step before you address anything, though, is to really genuinely look in the mirror and understand where you are as an organization against those key areas you talked about: CMDB, knowledge, process. Where do you go? So let's say, you have, let's start with IT, right? It's the area that we are historically most familiar with. And I imagine many organizations will probably look at IT. In fact, ServiceNow have looked at IT. It's the first, really, super agent, if you want to call it that. The L1 agent is where they, for IT is where they have started. So let's just say that you are in a good place, right? You have a good level of data quality in your CMDB. You have invested in knowledge and knowledge management on an ongoing basis. You understand your processes. What next? Because there are some key considerations here, aren't there? Particularly around the investment that you make, right, today, and how that might impact on investments you might have to make in the future.
I would look at it if you're in a good place, Sunil, right? I would look at it at looking to try and bring in agentic AI from a certain sorts of autonomous use cases where applicable. I'm not saying you go full autonomy, but you might be some level of autonomy you apply to this. The governance is critical to this. So when AI operational metrics, what your orchestration strategy is, how your cross-platform AI is going to work, because if you are in a good place when it comes to IT, you also have AI in other applications that you're also using. So you need to be mindful of that. I think if you are going to look at this, then you need to start to try and work on what that strategy looks like and what that potentially will cost, because you will need to start to be able to measure in ServiceNow terms what that's going to be. I'm not talking about implementation costs. I'm talking more around ongoing run and use of AI, because AI isn't free.
Consumption-based costs.
Exactly, yep. So ServiceNow has moved very much towards consumption-based pricing across all of what they're providing now. And everyone needs to probably be aware of what that looks like. You will get X amount to start with, but what you actually have to pay depends on what you actually use. So the more efficient you are and the more you consume, the more that might potentially cost. So there'll be a lot of work to be done on how to simplify. And when I say that, simplify workflows, that means it's really, really important, because the more simplified you can make your workflows, the less you'll spend on AI to drive those.
Yeah, absolutely. And hence the focus on get your processes right, because, you need to, as you say, iterate, improve, make those processes more efficient. Absolutely. I think this will be, being customer centric, thinking about this from a customer perspective, this will be one of the bigger challenges that customers will have, particularly if you are a CFO, for example, because you will want to understand what that future cost profile looks like. You will want to be able to budget for it, and to be able to have certainty. It may be very difficult, put it that way, to have that certainty. Your operating model may change as a result of investment in AI and the AI technologies that you bring to fulfill workflows. So there will be a degree of experimentation. And I think that comes back to the point you made. Don't go big bang on this. Select specific, workflow that you can, with a high degree of confidence, A, predict, but also B, successfully fulfill using AI, and grow from there.
I agree, and when we talk about long term, for what I took away from Knowledge 26 is that organizations need to start preparing now for a hybrid workforce model. Right? In everything we saw last week, everyone is looking at this. They're preparing for this. to the concept of human and AI workers working together, which we talked about earlier on the L1 service desk agent working with the higher value add people in those teams. But that ties into then this concept of digital labor economics. We can have probably a separate podcast on that, which we won't do. But like there is, you talked about it there. There's going to be a redesign of operating models, right? A redesign of what a team structure looks like. A service desk is going to be restructured into the AI workers plus the humans. Think of it like software asset management. You will have a number of software asset managers within your team, right? Who are performing specific operations in that team around harvesting, reuse, recycle of licenses, procurement, for example, when it's required. All those things will be done autonomously, I would suggest, and people will be focused more on the metrics and what they're achieving from that. But longer term, I think if you are in this space, you need to be preparing for a hybrid workforce. And specifically, how does that look like from a digital labor perspective? Because you're not just paying for technology, you're paying for outcomes now, right? In the same way you paid somebody, a member of staff, and you gave them salary, you gave them benefits, you gave them bonuses, etc., right? We have the same concepts when it comes to AI in the future, right? So where the surety comes in the future is, what does the profile of my digital labor need to look like alongside my human labor? That's where it's going to be. And we could probably have a 1,000,001 podcast on that concept alone, but that's where it's going. That's where it's going. Like, forget about technology. That's where it's going. These are just enablers to enable this to happen. I would say because governance is so important then, because being able to measure, secure, manage, observe, monitor, realize value, these are all huge things. I think also boards. It's a topic on boards now. Is AI governance, right?
As it should.
What are we doing with it? Yeah, well, what are we doing with it? But then, what are we doing it? How do we then make sure it's secure? How do we operate it? How do we measure it? All these things, like, yeah. So if you're a CFO, you're probably saying, well, I need to spend money at the start, but I also need to measure it and need to return value and report back to the CEO and the board that what it's actually achieving for us. These are huge things.
Now, so before we move on to our final section, question for you. You said who owns AI? Who do you think should own AI?
At the moment, I think the CEO owns AI. Quite funny enough.
I would agree.
Because,
I would agree.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And at the moment, the CEO owns AI, but I think there needs to be in the same way there is in lots of areas in an organization. So the CIO has a team of people. The CIO is a critical person when it comes to AI in the future. The CISO is a critical person because they're involved from security and they need to be able to protect the organization and protect the assets, protect the identities, protect the outcomes that are occurring. So and the data, and then within that, individual lines of business also own AI. So IT, HR, customer support, facilities, finance. They're all key stakeholders. Who owns it? That's where I think you need a massive racing matrix when it comes to this from a governance perspective in relation to who owns what decisions, but they're all stakeholders, right? Right? Not just users, but their input and consumers. So it's got potential to be absolutely crazy, is what I would say. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So I think it was I completely agree. The CEO in today's organization owns AI. Because I think that there is a huge opportunity, and that is the remit of the CEO. There is also huge risk. That is also the remit of the CEO. But I think there was a very good tell in Knowledge that one of the keynote speakers that joined Bill McDermott on stage was the CEO of FedEx. So last year, it was the CIO of Stellantis, the big motor vehicle manufacturer. This year, it was the CEO. And that is a good indicator of ServiceNow moving not just into the C-suite. They've been in the C-suite for a long time. They are moving to the very top of the C-suite. that's the relevance that they hope to have in the future.
Yeah, it's obvious, but it's also that it's not just AI is not a technology project anymore. In the same way that IT might have delivered projects, right? AI is not a technology project. It's becoming an operational tool across the organization and needs to be governed in the same way that any operational tool like that is used, right? It's owned by the organization. It drives improvements, it drives efficiencies, it drives ability to scale, ability to differentiate, ability to generate new products. It's fundamental.
I mean, Mark, you touched on it before, right? The AI agentic workforce needs to work in partnership with the human workforce. It needs to be considered as the human workforce was. It's in the same breath. So, okay, so let's move on to the last sort of segment, I guess, of this episode, which is, what does that mean for an organization like Xcession, a services partner? We have customers running ServiceNow, some customers that don't. How does our delivery model need to change in line with the way in which our customers will be changing?
Hugely, yeah. So this is where the role of a partner is changing massively in the ServiceNow ecosystem. Where typically before we would have provided guidance on implementation, executed that implementation, delivered, change on the platform, executed that change, right? To me, that all changes in the future. We now need to no longer be implementation partners, managed service partners. We need to be operational transformation partners for our customers. We need to be able to help them to redesign their workflows. We need to be able to help them to implement governance on the ServiceNow platform using the AI Control Tower. We need to help them to work on new operating models from an AI perspective, which includes where we fit in that as well as their own teams, right? We need to be able to reimagine and redesign integrations, where typically before we had integrations, we had APIs. That all changes now. We need to be able to work with different platforms, such as the big LLM models, such as Claude, OpenAI, etc., Copilot. We need to be able to support organizations to change their organizations, if that makes sense, to be more AI literate, to learn about how to use AI across the organization, to retrain staff, we can't throw technology at this. This needs to be an organizational change program, right? And how you define and deliver services is going to transform. I personally think that the era of the SLA might be over in a lot of areas too, right? Yeah. I think the outcome is being replaced, will replace the SLA, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
So what I mean by that is that typically, for example, if you look at IT, you would have a percentage of response and resolution against P4 incidents, right? Now what you'll have a mean to resolve, right? Which is a better outcome and a better metric to look at rather than, the watermelon effect of the SLAs are green and everyone hates IT. So these are the types of outcomes that will change. Yeah, reduce time to hire, all these things, which are the key metrics we've always talked about. They're the outcomes that will be delivered. And for partners like Xcession, we need to be front and center to work with our clients to be able to execute on that.
Yeah. And I would say that we are already having conversations around how we change our delivery model to be much more focused on delivery of those outcomes rather than delivery of a story in ServiceNow. So, I would, won't change overnight, right? Because it requires the customers to move in that direction as well. We'll be moving, I guess, in lockstep with them. But, expect to see those sorts of changes happen across Xcession and across the industry. So, I think we've hopefully covered the majority of what was talked about in knowledge. It will be, I think, hugely impactful over time. And what we've seen, I think, is a view into, the future a little bit, haven't we? The reality, as always with these things, might change, but I think the direction of travel is pretty set here, isn't it? So, Mark, before we close, any final thoughts or comments?
The other thing I would say to everyone is definitely don't panic and chase every AI trend that you hear, even on this podcast, right? The key thing for me is that if you want to focus on your own operational maturity, get your governance in place, look at practical outcomes you want to achieve from what you're doing with technology, such as this and AI. If you get the foundations right, you'll move much more faster over time than those who actually dive straight into AI, believe me.
Absolutely. And finally, if anybody is listening to this and you've got to the end, well done, first thing. But secondly, if you want to have a conversation, reach out to me, reach out to Mark. We would be delighted to spend some time with you and we can talk through in more detail what we learned at Knowledge and how it may or may not apply to you as an organization. So thank you very much for joining. We'll look forward to the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.